Let's talk about a word that I don't think we talk enough about as leaders, and that's the word tension. Too often when we think about leadership or what we're doing in our life, we don't want tension. We don't acknowledge it enough to realize that tension can also be that thing that wakes you up, that keeps you alert, that encourages you to understand more, to ask more questions.
Welcome to Badass Softy, a podcast for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious and want to lead with heart because you're allowed to chase big goals without losing what makes you human. I'm your host, Dr. JJ Peterson, and today I am so excited to introduce to you my friend, Justin Ahrens. Justin is such an incredible human being. He is a designer and a strategist and a story maker. And he really believes that creativity is one of the most powerful ways that we can love the world. And so he helps people be creative. And he's done this for 3 decades, and he helps them kind of show up on purpose with their brand and their message. He founded Rule 29, which is a brand agency that has helped some of the biggest companies in the world and won all the awards. And he's also the chief creative officer for not only Rule 29, but O'Neill Printing. And he works to blend design and storytelling and strategy to help brands grow. But really, what I love about him more than anything is he is always takes a human first approach to everything. And we talk about this in the podcast. So if you've ever been in a space where you feel like, how do I try to get things done while also making sure that I keep my humanity and the humanity of others around me at the center of things, this conversation is for you because it's not always easy. And Justin and I talk about that in the interview. So I am so excited for you to get to know my friend, Justin Ahrens, on today's episode of Badass Softy. Here we go. Justin, I am so excited that you're on the podcast today. And before we get really into it, I like to tell people why they're on the podcast. And the reason
you want to tell me or tell people listening?
I want to tell you.
Okay.
You personally. Okay, yeah. Okay. Why you're on the podcast. So you and I, met, I talked about it a little bit in the intro many years ago when we were working with a nonprofit that does community development in Africa. And instantly, like, not only were you a real good time and we laughed all the time, but you were a total badass at what you did. You helped redesign the entire branding for this company. We ended up doing a book. We ended up doing a video. You took ideas and always went, okay, but what if we did this? So I just knew that I needed to have you on Badass Softy because you truly are, Justin, a badass softy. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you. You mean my 100 texts of why I'm not on the show yet? That wasn't the reason?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody else that does that, I just ignore them. But you, I was like, well, got to make it happen sometime. So you run a company called Rule 29. And I started working for this nonprofit called Life in Abundance. And I literally remember when I went to work my first day, we opened up a drawer in a desk and found handwritten ledgers of donations for the past 5 years. Like, there was nothing computerized. There was no real graphics. There was a logo, I believe, but I couldn't tell you what it did. There was it was an amazing organization that was doing powerful things in the world, really, in 7 different countries in Africa. I mean, it was just kind of unbelievable, and yet nobody knew who they were. And you came in and built a brand, really built the brand from the ground up with a message that took them global in a whole new way. And I'm I would love to hear, because obviously when I met you, you'd been doing this for a long time, but what was it that kind of drew you into the marketing branding world, and why did you want to do things? I'll just start it with this. Why did you want to do things differently than you had seen other people doing them?
Yeah, I think ever since I was a kid, I was fascinated, by story. I think you and I have talked about it before. When I was a kid, I was kind of nerdy. I read everything. I mean, not that Tolkien is nerdy, but it could be, yeah, yeah. But think whatever you genre you want to talk about, from Star Wars to whatever. There was this power of story, and I didn't understand. I couldn't have articulated that back then, but that was always really attractive. And as I discovered design, but even more particularly brand strategy, I believe, just we are born in our DNA to a couple of things. One, we are constantly thinking about what story we're in, what story we want to be in, right? And then I get to be in a world where I can help frame that story. And again, it could be framed poorly, right? And maybe for nefarious ways. But what's beautiful is you get to understand the human condition and how we all want to see ourselves in a story that, it's positive. I'm the hero, I win, or I'm taken care of, or whatever. And when you get to do work like Life in Abundance, where you can actually tell a story of deep human need and how you can be involved in it, and you get to connect something that's ultimately what life is about, which is, taking care of your neighbor, loving those around you. Man, that's just the best.
The way you approach design is really kind of a human-centered way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that. Like when you kind of say that you do human-centered design, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, it actually goes back to my first trip to Africa. I think it was with you. We were in the middle of Kibera in Kenya. Kibera is I think still one of the largest slums in the world. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking around and I'm in this just incredibly awful place. And here I am, middle-aged white dude from the suburbs. What in the world can I do to make impact in that scenario? It's so far from my context. It just doesn't make sense to me. And that's Jay, that befuddled me. I didn't know what to do. I thought, like, man, I don't think I know how to tell the story. And then I remember I just sat down and I thought about the simplest thing, which is how can I help someone see what's happening from the people we're trying to serve's perspective? And although we've always tried to do that in what we do, I didn't feel it inside until that moment. And actually, I came home and we changed everything we did. So like literally when we were doing golf club catalogs, I try to think differently about, hey, what does it feel like when, you walk up to like a golf ball and you hit things perfectly. And I go, that's not as beautiful and human as, doing the nonprofit work we did, but still it was reshaping how we looked at things. And I think for a long time, if I was to be honest, I was doing work that I was really excited about and I wanted to do, and not so much targeted to the story that we were trying to tell to the people we were trying to impact. And so that's really what it started, is before we start anything, what is it that the people we're serving, whatever that service is, what are we trying to really get them to feel? And then we go from there.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I mean, you're bringing back, I haven't talked about this in a long time, but just you're bringing this back of this idea of how do you tell a story in a way that centers the human versus the tragedy or the difficulty, and how do you be honest and honor that? And you're right, like, the work that then you and I both have continued to do is say, how do you approach it's weird. I don't want to make a harsh transition here, but this idea that how do you then communicate to people, whether it's in leadership or in marketing, in a way that honors their story and where they're at first, versus like start with the product or what you're trying to accomplish, or getting, honor and praise for the website that you built or the commercial that you made or the movie project or the social media post. But how do you actually start every form of communication with the person in mind, the human in mind that you are communicating with? And how do you invite them into a story, as well as communicating their story in a way that honors that humanity? And that's a very tricky thing to do often. And like you said, it's hard to do when you're in slums that have just been kind of decimated by riots, and then it's also hard to do when you're selling golf balls. And that's a weird thing to say, but I think a lot of us find ourselves in those kind of situations often where
No, and the reason I made that comparison, because literally I was on the plane and I was writing down the work that we're doing. And we had at the time we had a huge golf club company. And so I'm just like, how do I put these two together? How can I justify this work and that work, right? And what's crazy is both of the work was important. And so from my standpoint, the responsibility, as crazy as it sounds, was the same. Either I don't do certain types of work, or I create a process or framework to, approach this challenge with that context every time.
I mean, that's so important. I also remember this was kind of in my own journey. So I did improv comedy for a little bit. And I remember one time, same thing. I went on a trip to.
Oh, you're not setting me up for a bit right now, right?
No, no.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Give me a place where people work and make it snappy. No, I remember I was touring, doing improv, and I had a break, and I went to visit some friends who were doing some international aid work, and came back from that trip. And then I'm on stage where people are paying a lot of money to watch me perform. And I felt so gross up on that stage, and people were coming up afterwards and like getting my autograph and, asking me for pictures. And I had just literally come from a place where people were dying because they didn't have $12, to pay for a medical bill. And I was just like, I don't know how to do this. I actually walked away from the table where we were signing autographs. And I remember going into a corner and kind of trying to hide. And this family came over and said, hey, we just want to thank you because tonight's the first night we've been out since our son died in a car accident. And we were able to laugh for the first time. And I remember
that was a little gift, JJ.
Yeah. I mean, well, I remember being incredibly humbled in the moment because I was like, I was, going kind of complaining a little bit about the work that I had been given because I was like, well, this isn't important. And I was a little bit high horsey about it. And I began to realize in that moment that every time that I show up, no matter in what capacity, whether it's on stage or whether it's, again, creating websites or emails, that I have to grasp, grapple with, especially like right now in the world where there's a lot of hard things happening in the world. Crazy stuff is happening. And we have to continue in our work, in the things that we do. And how do you show up being fully human in those spaces and also honoring the human on the other side of those spaces in a way that is not one is necessarily more important. Is world peace more important than selling a product? Absolutely. And yet we also have to work at both a lot of the times. And I think that is part of what being human is like showing up in those spaces, honoring both things. Like there's really hard things and those are important to be in. And there's really things that don't feel as hard, but like, then you go, well, maybe I should only be doing the hard things. And it's like, well, no, both matter. And you actually have to show up as your full human in order to do the work and survive in this world, really.
I agree. Let's talk about a word that I don't think we talk enough about as leaders. And that's the word tension. We live in tension. If we're healthy, again, this is my opinion. I think as a healthy adult, and in my space, a healthy brand strategist, brand developer, you live in tension. For example, personally, I don't like labeling things. I don't like giving things names. I like approaching them openly with curiosity and trying to experience something authentically. That's not how the majority of the world works, as you know, right? It's very dualistic, it's very extroverted, and all kinds of other things. And so we live in this constant tension. And I think we don't acknowledge it enough to realize that tension often is considered a negative word, and it definitely can be. But tension can also be that thing that wakes you up, that keeps you alert, that encourages you to understand more, to ask more questions. And it hasn't been I don't know, maybe the last few years. In fact, as terrible as this is to say, this is maybe one of the silver linings I gained from COVID is this. I learned more about tension. I explored it more because I had some challenges, as most of us did, and I thought this exists and this exists, and that's okay. And I need to figure out how to navigate those and how to understand them. And I think for me, it's encouraged me to again learn more, be open more, ask more questions. And I think too often when we think about leadership or what we're doing in our life, we don't want tension. And I think that's the wrong approach.
Yeah, because learning how to step into that in a way that you can keep going and keep serving and growing and all those things, I think is so important. And and so that, again, that's kind of why, not kind of, it's why I wanted to have you here because you walk in those tensions and walk in that all the time and try to figure out, like, how do we continue to be human, continue to honor other people's stories, continue to center other people's stories in the work that we're doing, while also building a business and selling things and all of that together. And, you have a book coming out really soon that actually is available for pre-order now that is called Being Humankind. And what you talk about in it is really choosing courage, compassion, and clarity in a kind of sometimes crazy and distracted world. So talk to me a little bit about what inspired this book and what is in this book for people who want to read it.
I love it. Thank you for that intro. Well, again, going back to, again, I can't wait in our life where we don't mention the lockdown, but going back to that space, I just started writing and journaling of like what was going on, right? And how I was feeling. And at the time, right before it happened, Rule 29 was having its best year ever. And then it was a fight to get through it. And I started just thinking about how I showed up every day. And I started writing down what I called states of being, right? So I thought, what is it like to being human? And then, I started thinking about this concept of humankind, like all of us. And so it's all a play on words, right? It's being human, being kind, being humankind. Like we have the ability to show up every day how we choose to. Some days are going to be really easy. Some days are going to be unbelievably hard. And all of our stories on context are different. And I think at that time too, I think I was also reading a lot of Brene Brown, assume that people are doing the best they can. And all of these things started influencing it. And so throughout the years, I was just writing things down. And then about 3 years ago, I was like, man, I think I should do another book. I did a book called Life Kerning, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. And it's funny, I would help authors build their brand and then help them go and, kind of evolve that. And when my first book came out, I sort of freaked out. I was like, wow, there's a lot of personal stuff in there. I didn't think about people actually reading it, which is crazy. And so not that I didn't give it my full effort, but I didn't really promote it because I felt insecure. I had imposter syndrome about it. I felt, man, I gave a lot of my personal voice in there. And so I'm now at the stage in life where I'm just like, I think I have some really interesting things to say. I've split the book into 5 practices of being, the essential ways we show up that ground everything else, right? So just starting at the foundation of who we are. Then I think it comes to leading yourself. These are the qualities that help you direct your life with purpose and clarity. And, from there, you talk about growing, like the mindset, the shifts and the strengths that help you adapt and thrive, right? This is, comes to new technology, the way the world is. And then being with others, it feels like we, in some ways, need to relearn how to connect and build trust and make relationships that last. It feels at times with social media and the world, it's harder and harder for us to connect. And then finally, it's about creating your legacy, the actions and attitudes that leave something meaningful, not only behind, but in your current presence. And so I think together, these are things that we can come back to again and again to what makes us more human. And I'm just excited to get this out into the world.
I am so excited for people to read this book, and because I love that not only does it give these high principles, but some really practical things that you can do to be human and kind and kind of live as a human yourself. So as we start to wrap up here, I want to just ask you about kind of this new world that we're living in, this digital world where more of our lives are online, more marketing is created by AI, all this stuff in the design space. And you are leaning into the human side even more now. What gets you excited about this new kind of era that we're living in with AI and more digital and all of that? Because I know if we're staying in it, we got to stay in it for a reason. And we're staying in because I'm excited about it. But I'm curious from you, what are you excited about in this new age of more digital and more AI when you're focusing on being human?
Yeah, that's great. There's two things that are kind of happening at the same time in my life. One, I'm completely leaning into AI, vibe coding, creating apps, experiences, and really understanding it because there's, in my opinion, there's no choice. Like this is not going away. The genie's out of the bottle, right? And in doing that, I really want to look at how can I keep this human centered? How can I do this authentically? How can I do this appropriately? At the same time, a mutual friend of ours, Brian McDonald, and I have started this gathering called At the Table, where we bring 4 people together that don't know each other. And for 2 hours, we guide them through a conversation that really is just about whatever shows up in the room. And what's really interesting is these two things together seem completely not related, but they actually very much are. Because like any other tool that happens today, I love AI. I know the downsides of it. I'm not putting my head in the sand, but it actually has allowed me to do deeper research, to go through information at a higher level and create opportunities for me to actually have my work be more human-centered. I mean, we even do audits now with AI, where before people just fill out a Google form, and there's this conversational experience happening where we're getting much cleaner, much clearer, much more authentic human info. And so these are all things that are a part of our world. And I think, like anything, you have the right purpose, the right perspective, and you can really point it in a way that makes the work incredible.
Justin, if people are interested in pre-ordering Being Humankind, where should they go to find that?
Yeah, so you can go to behumankind.today. And also would love to promote my 2 podcasts, Running Ahrens, which JJ is on, and actually Design Of, which JJ is also on.
That's right. I've been on both of your podcasts. Love that. Justin, thank you for being here and for all you do in the world and for being my friend and for continuing to push me to be a better human and also to be better in my work because you're doing both.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for the work you're doing. And you are the ultimate badass softie.
Love you.
Love you.
I love that conversation. Justin and I could have kept going probably for forever. Really, we have so many stories. You know, and there were so many things that jumped out at me in that. The whole idea of, you know, AI helping you be more human, not less human. The different pieces of Justin's book that started with just like grounding yourself in who you are and growth. And I mean, so many amazing things. But the thing I think I'm going to take away from today's conversation is really the whole idea about this tension, the idea of tension in life. You know, there really are a lot of times in my life that I feel like I've done, quote unquote, more important work than other times, right? Like say when I'm doing nonprofit work and I'm doing things that are really making a difference in people's lives, that's the important work. Whereas, you know, when I am trying to sell a product for somebody, that's less important in the world. And I know that there's gravity to both of those things, but the reality is the important work is how you show up in those spaces, right? Because I can show up doing nonprofit work and I can be an asshole, right? And I can actually leave a lot of damage behind me. In fact, I've worked for a lot of nonprofits where Some of the way that the leaders showed up was not healthy for the people they were serving, nor was it healthy for the people that they were serving with. So it's not just about the work, but it's how you show up in the work. And, you know, I've also worked for these unbelievable companies that are, you know, selling just what you would call like normal everyday products. And yet the way that they show up in the world actually makes a huge difference. And so there's this tension a lot of times that I feel of where, I need to be doing more important work, or I need to do this kind of work. But the truth is, the work is how you show up. You can be doing anything, and you can show up as an asshole, or you can show up as a kind person who helps people win. That, I think, was a good reminder for me today, you know, and in all of those things, being incredibly intentional about all of it, and really keeping humanity and humans at the center of all that work. Because no matter how you're showing up or how you're communicating, there's always a human on the other side of that. And when you can put yourself in their shoes with empathy and understanding and learn from them out of curiosity and not out of coming at them with you know, a bunch of knowledge or transactional things, but actually showing up with real curiosity and learning from them. That is what actually is, I think, the work that we need to be leaning into a little bit more. And that was just an incredible reminder from this conversation with Justin today. So to close us out in this time, let me leave you with this. May you remember that being kind and human is not a detour from ambition, but the way through it and the way to show up. May you learn to live in the tension between conviction and curiosity, between the different types of work that you have to carry, and between the weight of getting things done while remaining human. May you design your work with people in mind, not as segments or data points, but as people carrying stories, hopes, and weight you may never fully see. And may you be reminded that the best stories are the ones that honor humanity, not take advantage of it. Because we believe you can be both ambitious and kind, fun and driven, powerful and deeply human. Your leadership can inspire, your success can have soul, and your ambition can make space for everyone. That's why you're a badass softie. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Follow and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. BadassSoftie.com is crafted by Fruitful Design and Strategy.